It's been a sad week in the world of stained glass with the announcement of the death of Sir Brian Clarke on the 1st of July 2025. This video really is my own personal tribute to Brian Clarke, who's been a huge influence on my entire artistic career. And it's also an introduction to you, the creative community, who may not know of the importance of Brian Clarke and the influence and impact he has made on countless creatives to take up stained glass as a medium of expression. And if you're not familiar with his work, today's video really is just a little bit of a tribute, a personal tribute from me to the legacy of Sir Brian Clarke and the importance that he's played in contemporary stained glass. So like me, you may have woken up on the 2nd of July to a host of tributes being paid to Sir Brian Clarke from friends and colleagues and associates who were equally shocked to hear of his untimely death.
In order to successfully create stained glass that can compete with any painting or other medium of the same period, you have got to throw away all your preconceptions about what the medium is. You'll throw it all away. And when you throw it all away, a new world opens up to you.
So who is Brian Clarke and why is he so important? You could well be forgiven for never having heard of Brian Clarke, especially if you've not come through the art school system. If you're perhaps a hobbyist or you've come through the route of being self-taught, you may never have been exposed to the influence that is Brian Clarke. And back in the 80s, his influence was undeniable, and his reach and his particular brand that is Brian Clarke is familiar to very many glass artists, professional glass artists particularly, who are working in the field today. And as part of this tribute to him, I've reached out to some glass contemporaries of mine here in the UK and in Europe and in the States to get their impressions of Brian Clarke and perhaps talk a little bit about his influence in the wider scheme of what is contemporary stained glass. In the world of modern glass art, few names resonate as profoundly as Brian Clarke. His innovative approach and visionary designs have left an indelible mark on the art form, inspiring generations of contemporary artists. Clarke's work transcends traditional boundaries, offering a fresh perspective on what glass art can truly achieve.
He's the first kind of hero, mass hero, if you like, of the modern age, and for people of our age that grew up as students looking at the work. And I think for that reason, it made it all the more devastating. And also on the back of his kind of recent success in the exhibition in London a couple of years ago, the big recent commission in Bahrain, and I just thought he's at the top of his game. He's really, at the moment, he's at a peak right now, and I thought this is actually tragic that this massive creativity has just stopped and like that.
Think it's hard to kind of put into words how much of a North Star he was for generations of glass artists, especially of our vintage who were going through the art school system maybe in the 80s, even into the 90s. He was just this North Star. And even although you may not have, I saw very few artists designing in the same way that he would design, but he was still a massive influence, yeah?
Yeah, I think it was completely unique. It had a unique voice at a time when, probably the kind of what was the norm in terms of kind of British glass designers was to follow that more traditional kind of, Gothic style of glass painting and figurative work, and the stuff that we all, that we know. I think to be as bold and graphic and as abstract an idea, but in a kind of graphic way, and using grids and kind of breaking away from that tradition of what the kind of post-war British tradition was, I thought was incredibly brave and really visionary. Because it was through looking at his work that I started to understand the German glass artists. Only by looking at Clarke's work was I able to then go back and see that influence of post-war German artists, Schreiter, Schaffrath, all those people, and really look at that sort of modern glass, which is what it was. And that's what made it was so ahead of everything. That's what it always felt like to me. It just felt as if it was like 3 or 4 steps ahead of what everybody else was doing.
Brian Clarke's body of work is vast and varied, encompassing projects across the globe. From the vibrant stained glass windows of the Leeds shopping centre to the ambitious architectural collaborations with Zaha Hadid, Clarke's work is characterized by its bold use of colour and form. If you look at his early work, it's slightly more muted, but then it became this very high colour palette, and he was doing it long before anybody else was. And I think that idea of him being that North Star, and you don't necessarily have to like everything that he does, but you paid attention to what he did, because he was kind of like reinventing what it could possibly be, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think so, Derek. I think the colour obviously became more intense as he went on, and I loved a lot of his early work. I loved a lot of that kind of the stuff that he was kind of doing in almost in the punk era, his little collages that were then translated into glass, where you've got things like safety pins on collages, and that kind of, the punk ethos, which is what he was kind of channeling, because at that time, creatively, artistically, he was doing with glass what the musicians were doing with music. He was breaking out of the kind of straitjacket of the kind of conventional artist, and doing this really modern, really using grids and squares and interrupting these kind of grids with amorphic forms. They would kind of sort of interrupting the rhythm, and the whole thing was just really, for me, was massively exciting, and I'd never seen anything like it. There was nothing like it before or since. It really is. It's work that will stand the test of time because it's so unique.
His ability to integrate glass art into architectural spaces has set a new standard, making his work both a visual and structural element. Clarke's influence extends beyond his own creations. His writings have inspired a new generation of glass artists to explore the medium's potential. By challenging traditional norms and encouraging experimentation, Clarke has opened the doors for artists to express themselves in innovative ways and to rewrite the rulebook on what stained glass can be.
My God, what a piece to end on, What a statement to end on, really, that enormous piece, the complexity and the beauty and the use of colours. Absolutely stunning. When we think back how he began, with leaded pieces, beautiful colour as well. But this, I hope we've got the sense of my admiration for Brian. I was not directly influenced by him in that way. At the time when I was seeing Brian's work, I was fascinated by the Chagall Jerusalem windows. There was a beautiful book in the Art School Library, Glasgow School of Art Library then, and it showed how he designed, how he made the sketches, how he developed the ideas, how he went through sort of collage phases and stuff. And I was kind of on that side, and I just started glass painting, as well. I hadn't really done that during the normal degree. But I absolutely, deeply admired them. And as I say, what a way to finish a career, to make that artwork astonishing.
His work has been a gateway for many to explore the intersection of art, architecture, and design. Clarke's work is renowned for its vibrant colour palette. This fearless use of colour sets his work apart, creating a visual impact that is both striking and memorable. Moving away from traditional figurative designs, Clarke embraces abstract and graphic forms, often using grids. This approach brought a modern sensibility to glass art, aligning it more with contemporary artistic movements.
People were interested in what he had to say, and he's someone who certainly felt a German influence. And yes, I agree. Brian Clarke's work looks like he's like influenced by the post-war German stained glass artists like Schaffrath and maybe Schreider. But also he sort of married that with sensibility with pop art, which I think is where his brilliance lies, because pop art, I don't know if I would call Brian Clarke's work humorous exactly, but it was wry and ironic. I mean, I love the pieces he did with the bombs and the skulls, things like that. I think they're really amazing pieces.
Clarke's collaboration with leading architects highlights his ability to seamlessly integrate glass art into architectural glazing schemes. His work enhances the structure and aesthetic quality of buildings, making it an integral part of the whole architectural experience. Despite the grand scale of many of his projects, Clarke infused personal elements into his design. Referencing his mother and personal motifs has added depth and intimacy, connecting the viewer to the artist's personal narrative. Clarke's experimentation with materials and techniques pushed the boundaries of what glass art could be. His use of antique glass contributed to the unique texture and quality of his work.
A great intellect, an incredibly fascinating man. People wonder why he knew everybody who was anybody, and he did know everybody who was anybody. Was I was there, Mick Jagger was on the phone. Why did he know everybody who was anybody? Because he is an absolutely fascinating person. A very interesting thing actually is to talk to people over the years who've worked for him. They really are very, very complimentary. And I always think that's such a measure of somebody, that how they treat the people who work for them, whether they genuinely have a loyalty to this person and they really admired him. They knew he was single-minded about art. But I had this very much of a vision of what stained glass could do, which was entirely, of course, imbued into me by Brian, that it was this big thing, we should be doing secular, large projects. And it was partly the scope of the way he thought. He thought big, and it wasn't that he trained me to think big. I never really knew how to think small, because I'd never really run into making front door windows. And I know he had a huge influence on Graham Jones, who I've worked with for years and I've always been a huge admirer of. And Graham also found him artistically incredibly influential. It's interesting, Brian, of course, often described himself in the early days as working with a very, very limited palette, what he called the heraldic palette. I'm sure you've noticed this, that in the very later time of his life, he suddenly abandoned that sort of rectilinear grid that he'd really primarily worked with for many, many decades, and moved into this, I was going to say pastoral, but much more this sort of landscape and fluid sort of image.
Yeah.
Maybe that happens to all of us as we get older. We lose that sort of edge, that sort of slightly aggressive edge that we have in our 20s and 30s, and we just want to, kick out and sort of, show people this is how it is, and suddenly we enjoy the world.
I get the impression that he did relax, and he did he almost allowed himself to enjoy just the beauty of the experience of seeing things.
Beauty is a really crucial and magical world. That's the other thing that's really, really important to say is that this project he's recently done, and of course he has others in the works now, this project at Bahrain Airport, it is a masterpiece of what you can do with the materials that we've been working with for many, many centuries. And you can't say he's reinvented it, but he has exposed what we can do.
Brian Clarke's legacy in modern glass is one of innovation, inspiration, and unparalleled creativity. His work continues to inspire new generations of artists, ensuring that his influence will be felt for many decades to come. As we reflect on his contributions, we're reminded of the limitless possibilities of glass as a medium for true artistic expression. I hope you enjoyed today's video tribute to Sir Brian Clarke. I'll leave more information in the notes below this video in the description where you can do further reading. I'll also leave some of his obituaries, which are really touching and moving from British Society of Master Glass Painters and other institutions, as well as national press. And also, if you want to learn a little bit more about Clarke, check out this video here, which is a review of his last solo show down at the Damien Hirst Gallery in London, where I review it with fellow glass artist John Rentians, MBE. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.